Welcome back to Decentralized Nutritional Science in the frame, lens and context of economics and inaccessibility. My name is Andrew, and welcome to once again yet another, if however last parting few episodes of my self-journaling vlog surrounding my sharing of insight of the Novavax first dosage as well as the second dosage of Novavax vaccination in Australia. There is a lot that we need to unpack here, so hence, once as usual, this will be split into various sections and categories. So, starting with the first, the summary or the TLDR. I am very pleased to inform that throughout all the supplemental as well as the nutritional protocols that I myself actually followed within the chapter that actually I myself have written within the parent manuscript, I have so far not experiencing any further extreme malaises and fatigues, the lightheadedness, the pounding, very questionable pounding, strong pulsating headaches day in, day out, have been so far subsiding itself back to its defaults, to the point whereby it is just a matter of just me living through my daily motions of stressors as pretty much back to my default, so to speak. Biggest highlight will be such that I am able to resume, although not in its full entirety, of the training session and regimens. I am still, however, remaining somewhat a gray area when it comes to the fact that my push movement strength, that is, especially on my left arm, has been still somewhat lightly compromised, but not to the point whereby I am no longer able to operate any machinery on my left arm. But for however number of weeks now, ever since my first dose of Novavax as well as the second dosage now, it's such that there still appears to be some slight weakness still on my left arm. Here comes the big section of this presentation, in which we're going to be splitting this into two mini subsections. The first, I'll be talking about the nutritional perspectives and the accounts, and there's also followed by the supplemental, that is, what sort of supplements that I've been taking only within my own insight, circumstances, and for my own sake at managing the symptoms that I've been experiencing along the way throughout the last nearing 4.5 weeks, or even up to 5 weeks so far, technically speaking, down to this very day of recording this presentation altogether. Once again, just because that I'm sharing this as an insight over what I've done, it does not mean that it actually constitutes as absolute panacea, as such that it may absolutely work on everyone else. Remember once again that nutritional science comprises of numerous moving parts. And therefore, remind yourself that it is in your responsibility to scientifically authenticate yourself amidst these findings. Because it is in your responsibility, your indemnity, and your onus, therefore existential duty, to piece together these puzzles and or moving parts within your nuanced circumstances, within your nuanced immunology, physiology, metabolism, sociology. So having said all of the disclaimer once again, we shall proceed to the first section, the nutritional aspects. So when it comes to the nutritional interventions, we'll start with the most general and broad of them all, and that is to do with arrays of dietary protein intakes. So essentially, I've been trying to increase my protein intakes, although still somewhat less on the red meat intake side of things, but with some key exception to that, however, as such that I still nevertheless think that livers from organ meats nevertheless should remain a priority in my intake. And that sadly, and this appears to be quite interesting as such, that liver pate has been increasingly more and more quite difficult to find, especially amidst various major supermarket grocery chain stores. But all in all, as a general protein intake wise, I've been trying to diversify nevertheless towards other recent lucky findings, I should say, towards plant-based commercial meats. I have actually written this and advised this in the past that most, if not all of these vegetable and or plant-based meats don't actually need that much cooking at all. All it requires is just simply no more than 3 or 4 minutes on a microwave, even at that, at maximum. This is an addendum information. Another source of proteins that I've been emphasizing throughout all my years of low carbohydrate interventions in general is simply that of gelatin powders. So all it is just gelatin powders that's actually being easily bought within supermarket chains and stores, $3.70 for 100 grams. So usually these gelatin proteins are what I actually take only amidst dessert-based feature meals, that is, especially amidst low carbohydrate interventions. So this usually pairs best with saturated fatty sources such as creams, desiccated coconuts, and the like, and then followed by any other sweeteners of choice on top, obviously. How I would prep this is by setting aside at least 10 to 15 grams worth in a large bowl, pour it with boiling water, and then just gently stir it with a fork until everything dissolves, and then move it into the fridge for the setting process to begin. And what we can see here is just a little bit of a novelty trick, as such that for a more custard-like consistency, I usually mix in with my prior pumpkin cream batch. Another source that I've been also trying to emphasize upon, in which this leads on to our next point, will be that of dairy sources of protein. That is, from yogurts and or cheese. This can be extremely costly and very expensive because dairy cheese in general have been quite inflated in the pricing in general. So I am limited to feta cheese, in which there is another viable source of calcium, and also as a source of cheese, in which this can be quite palatable, but considering that feta cheese usually only being served in small amounts at a time. But other than that, the most occasional indulgence will be nothing more but a good old block of aged cheddar cheese, by which the more aged it is, I find that the more rewarding it is under my own preference, taste preference, that is. So that's that when it comes to my cheese preferences. And then other types of protein within the dairy I should also include as whey proteins. However, I should note that I have been no longer able to afford whey proteins in general since the last few months because of the higher cost of living, lifestyle pressures, as well as the various inaccessibility that's been happening everywhere. When it comes to fatty acid composition wise, I still nevertheless try to cycle one preference or one bias from days say 1 to 3. I shall set aside a habitual preferences towards saturated, and yet for other days I also would like to include other monounsaturated as well as PUFA sources as well, just to once again accommodate diversity. The PUFA intakes alone, we shall have to break this down into the N3s and the N6. Long story short, I have been emphasizing on the N3s PUFA side of things, because once again, just trying to be just to remain safe. And these fatty sources are pretty much coming not from supplements, however, still coming from food sources, by which that, unfortunately, due to, again, cost of living, have been pretty much enforced me to resort back to sardines. Unfortunately, even sardines themselves, have been skyrocketing in their prices gradually since over the last 1 year even. And then next we have the PUFA N6. The PUFA N6 is pretty much coming from my prior indulgences over many years of low carbohydrate intervention as simply nothing more than just peanut butters. And peanut butters have been pretty much the only accessible sources of nuts sources. Although technically speaking, it is actually classified as legumes. But nevertheless, one key concern that is mostly attributed or primarily attributed towards peanut butter, even though that they are actually proclaimed at some stage to have been proclaimed as the vegetarian's only source of CoQ10, they still nevertheless remain on the high side of omega and 6 fatty acids over the entries. I would say that I have been pretty much still trying to reduce their intake somewhat. So that is that to keep in mind when it comes to PUFA and 6. The next thing is to do with raising overall potassium status via means of the diet. Now, this can be quite challenging because I can only gather and access so much avocados, and that there are only so few vegetable sources that I can actually gather. There are not only low carbohydrate friendly during low carbohydrate days, and also for me to keep in mind at least that I do have some degree of sensitivity as such that many of these potassium-rich food sources, especially from the plant sources, do contain another source of concerns, and that is to do with oxalates. I would say for sure that yes, raising potassium intake nevertheless helps me and my lightheadedness symptoms somewhat under control throughout the day, and this also helps to address the headaches that I've been experiencing. Although once again, it may not completely cure it. It just simply slightly subsides itself in the background. That wraps up and concludes the entire nutritional outlook that I have been resorting to as a general summary snapshot over what I've been doing and resorting to throughout these 5 long weeks worth of self-journaling insights. Much of this, once again, have been pretty much indicated and implicated within the chapter, within my parent manuscript, as I've actually written a specific section dedicated towards immunology and the nutritional aspects and the various supplements that can help address the need for this. So here comes the supplements section. The camera actually died due to overheating issues, so hence this will be an audio-only version with several image slideshows. Number 1 will be to raise potassium intake with the use of potassium chloride. This potassium chloride will be simply mixed within bottled water to maintain hydration status throughout all fasting windows, and also sprinkled generously amidst warm beverages, teas and coffees. Maintaining a high available potassium status have been implicated towards a lessening severity of symptoms amidst COVID-like illnesses and our immune system in general, as once again implicated and shared amongst various general research findings. However, once again, this is not taken as a general safe for all advice, because potassium, if in excess, can actually be detrimental, and especially for those who are already taking potassium-sparing drugs to control blood pressure, may be wise to nevertheless consult with their guiding physician to determine whether or not it is safe or not safe to directly or to increase their potassium status with the usage of these potassium chloride salts. So another mineral that's actually quite important in our list would be obviously magnesium. I take anywhere between at least 1.5 tablets, split tablets that is, and all the way up to 2.5 tablets, depending on the severity of the pains that I'm actually experiencing, whether that is the lightheadedness, the headaches that actually may persist the fasting windows. Alternatively, there is also a topical oils approach, by which this is nothing more but magnesium chloride flakes mixed in with distilled water. So, to make this, simply take in a 1-to-1 ratio, so that would be, for example, 2 cups of distilled water and then 2 cups full amount of magnesium chloride flakes. And then, firstly, bring the distilled water to the boil, just briefly, and then turn off the heat. Bit by bit, just simply dissolve the flakes until it clearly dissolves and let it cool. After it all cools down, then simply transfer them into the mini containers. So to apply these oils, just simply apply them comfortably as needed. So this will be anywhere between on areas such as the necks, the arms, upper lats, and upper backs, etc. So that is that when it comes to magnesium. Next is zinc. Zinc is especially very helpful to me during my suspected cytokine or inflammatory-like event on the evenings of my second dosage of Novavax. It was that concerning as such that I had no choice but to look for my own nutraceutical intervention. I was actually very much convinced that zinc, with the usual cofactors, vitamin B6, manganese, and a little vitamin A, almost immediately within the hour, helps quell this inflammatory cytokine-like event. Next would be betaine HCl plus pepsin, although also we could arguably throw in creatine monohydrate there as well. The reason why I'm actually including these three altogether, is because to maintain favorable methylation status as well as to maintain favorable digestion and nutrient partitioning profile. Because once again, protein intake, especially when it is raised to a higher level, demands and justifies the need to maintain favorable digestion. So for those of you who wishes to know more about methylation and how it impacts and governs various very complex biochemistry processes, from immune health, digestion, protein digestion, obviously, and also how it impacts the psychology, please by all means visit other nutrition channels, most notably to that as Chris Masterjohn PHD. He specifically has shared to the public various free-to-view and free-to-read articles and lectures and lessons surrounding methylation. Keep in mind that this may yet require some prior basic acquaintances within biochemistry, but nevertheless should be approachable to most people. And another noteworthy discussion is also Peter Attia, MD, from his Drive podcast. Once again, Chris Masterjohn was actually invited. They actually talk and discuss about the various nuances of methylation and how creatine monohydrate was, despite briefly mentioned, nevertheless remained of prime importance amidst these entire methylation processes, with other subjects and topics, just to name a few. So for those of you who wishes to pursue and to deepen your research readings, please, by all means, I highly encourage you to visit these channels. But nevertheless, betaine HCl plus pepsin, what I consider to be one of the more underappreciated, yet arguably the most important supplements as we age through time. So that's that when it comes to digestion support and methylation status. Next will be vitamin D, and this is no surprise to us all. Easily, this can be dosage anywhere between 5k IU per day, which is my own general minimum per day, to 10k IU or even as high as 15k IU, especially amidst winter times. The brand that I'm using is simply Doctor's Best, which is EVO as its delivery vehicle. That is extra virgin olive oil. Next, of course, this leads on to vitamin K2. Unfortunately, due to vitamin K2's high pricing and costs, unfortunately, I can only take this as an every other day dosage at 180 micrograms with food. So 1 day on, 1 day off dosage scheduling. The only form of vitamin K2 that I'm actually only being interested for its overall immunological health and favorable calcium utilization status will be none other than the menaquinone Mark 7 derivative. So next will be vitamin E. Right now I'm actually dosing this on the higher end of the spectrum, by which that is 1,000 international units. Since this is such a high amount, I envisage this to only to be taken sporadically, unless if I'm eating and or anticipating higher PUFA and 6 meals and or foods. Why vitamin E? Vitamin E has been an interesting fat-soluble vitamin as such that not only that I'm actually witnessing that there are studies to proclaim its effectiveness at maintaining immunological health and overall COVID outcomes, but also there's been, over the years of my own exclusion and inclusion protocols, allowed me to find that vitamin E provides me the following effects that not many people talk about. Number one, increased and rapid hair growth, very much so. Number two, heightened sense of taste perception. And at number three, libido. But, however, apart from those three beneficial effects, there's also another reason to believe, that I have to believe as such, that vitamin E is also implicated amidst liver health. NAFLD, which is short for non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, has been strongly implicated amidst COVID markers of outcomes. So last but not least is to do with the NSAIDs, in which these are the non-steroidal painkillers that will be either ibuprofen or aspirin. This is quite a difficult topic to discuss because it actually involves a lot of nuanced discussions. I've usually been taking this to no more than a maximum of 2 regular dosages. So that is 2 times regular dosage of aspirin or 2 times of regular dosage of ibuprofen. The reason for my hesitancy in recommending this is for should next time occur, unless if the pain is really encumbering and severe, was that once again I've noted that amidst the use of aspirin, even more so than the usage of ibuprofen, in that I appear to have experienced a little bit more frequent episodes of the ear-ringing symptoms, the tinnitus. I can say for sure that gradual discontinuation of taking these NSAIDs, or at least lowering the dosages, actually help reduce these ear-ringing symptoms. However, nevertheless, ibuprofen is something that I have only been taking recently, so it is my thoughts on ibuprofen so far is quite preliminary and premature at this stage, so hence it is inconclusive at this stage whether or not ibuprofen is the more potent NSAID than the aspirin, or that it is the less inducing side effects. However, only time will tell. I will definitely say that all other supplements that I actually discussed before these NSAIDs should, in my humble opinion, take priority. So, in other words, the vitamin D and all the rest of the nutraceuticals, as well as the basic mineral intakes, should, in my humble opinion, be addressed to first and foremost. So once again, that concludes the section on NSAIDs. So that concludes the entire section on supplementations. Should I take, or would I take, Novavax as yet another jab or another booster? I will say no. There is just so much at stake that I have to say that no. But here is where a very difficult dilemma ties in. What happens then if the government tries to enforce third and fourth booster job mandate to the point whereby all employers are actually expecting their employees? I will say then once again, it is a very difficult topic by which that remains up to my own individual decision for me to weigh upon, considering the much bigger stakes of my livelihood. I would like to sincerely once again hereby proclaim that this self-journaling vlog will be one of the many few and last presences of me speaking earnestly and making this vlog style updates in first-person formatting perspective in front of a camera. Once again, due to the reasons that I've already disclosed, once again, the needs for privacy, confidentiality, and so that I do not wish to once again, to be respectful and for me to remain obedient within my probationary employment period. I'm only here to share lateral dialogues. Nothing more, nothing less. And that also, there is going to be a massive amount of structural changes coming in my way, in which this will demand a lot of attention and a lot of resources from my part. day in, day out. Hence, I may not be able to have the capacity nor the time to be able to curate, edit, produce, rehearse, and record this vlog style type journaling, at least in front of the camera, provided also with the annotations and the typographical elaboration that you see in front of you. All that matters is for your own individualization, for you to take ownership, for you to self-authenticate, and therefore for you to self-testify your own distinctions in society. Live your own convictions. Live it forward. Learn for yourself. Keep for yourself. Be yourself. Authenticate and repeat. My name is Andrew, signing out. This is nutritionalhumility.me. Live it forward, and thank you for watching.